This podcast is brought to you by The Shift.
It's story time!
Hello and welcome back to the Storytime Podcast. My name is Claire. I go by Clisare on the internet, and this is the podcast where people come on and they share their stories with me. And this week I have an interesting guest. I have Marissa Tyler. Hello, Marissa.
Hi.
And so a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to Heidi. Hello, Heidi. On this podcast. And Heidi, you shared your story of being a parent during a school shooting. And Marissa is actually that child that experienced that. And you want to come on today, Marissa, and share your story from your perspective, isn't it? Of like going through that.
Yeah.
Sweet. So before we get into the story, do you want to tell people where to find you on the internet?
I'm mainly on the art scene of Instagram, but I can't remember my own Instagram. I think it's Marissa Elena 64.
No worries. I will get the link and I'll have it on the screen and I'll have it in the link down in the description for the audio listeners. But yeah, go for it. You were the person who actually was there when that school shooting happened.
Yeah, I guess preface it, is that the right? Okay. I'm not good with English and I grew up here, but to preface it, it's like school shootings are a huge thing, especially in Colorado and the United States in general. We've had, I believe, four or five in just our small little area in like Denver, Colorado, and then one up in the mountains. The one up in the mountains was the first school shooting ever in the United States. That it was Columbine. I think Sandy Hook came before ours.
Oh,
yeah, Sandy Hook, and then mine, and then it was STEM.
STEM was, yeah,
and then it was STEM, and then one in Colorado Springs. But we also have a ton of just mass shootings, and we don't have always the best neighborhoods around. Like in our own neighborhood, my mom forgot to mention it. We had a shooting across the street over drugs, which is normal, but
wow,
nobody died in that one. They're in jail, but they're all good. But it's a huge thing, especially in Colorado. And one of my friends here was saying that it actually might be linked to the amount of sulfur in the water, since we are near Yellowstone.
Okay.
And that does cause a little change in brain chemistry.
Really?
Surprisingly, I didn't know that, but my friend Kelsey is really into weird natural stuff. But it started on, ironically, Friday the 13th, and it was Friday before finals. But I had known the kid for a while. We lived in a similar neighborhood. It was just like right across the street from us. And so I went to middle school with his sister. If he would see me working on Spanish, because also ironically, I grew up in a Mexican family and I was horrible at Spanish. Well, Spanish class, because I taught a completely different Spanish that I knew. But so he'd help me out on like off hours when he'd see me working on Spanish. But I was in my science class, and he came. My mom has a little bit of a different reaccounting, just because the police report didn't tell everything. So he came in through, we had a kind of a long school, and he came in through what we called the trophy hall, because that's where all the sports trophies were. And those doors are unlocked. We just now have a security guard there. And that's one of the only two doors that are open all day. And he just came in through there, and he was holding a gun. The janitor actually saw him go into the building, knew who he was going after, who wasn't a teacher actually, but was the librarian. And he was in charge of the speech and debate team, which Carl had recently been kicked off of for anger issues he'd had for years. He's always had anger issues. It was kind of a bubbling over type of thing for him. He had anger issues. His parents were getting a divorce. He didn't get into the school of his dreams for college. He was constantly bullied because he wasn't your stereotypical high school jock. He was one of the smartest kids in our school, passed 2 insanity tests. Our admin just kind of ignored the threats he made against teachers.
Sorry, what is an insanity test?
It's self-explanatory. They test
Really?
you.
Like,
Yeah.
there's a test that can kind of see if you're like a danger to other people, is it?
Yeah, but it doesn't work.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it really doesn't work. Anybody can pass it.
Wow. So that there's like a test to try and figure out if someone's a danger, and he had 2 of them.
Yeah, they made him go through 2 of them and he passed both of them.
Wow.
It's incredibly easy to pass.
Sorry, continue. I'd never heard of that phenomenon before.
Yeah, it's I guess a weird American thing. I think it works, but it doesn't. But so he came in through our trophy hall entrance, which was right under the top floor of the science building, the science area. It had 2 floors. The bottom floor is mainly physics and chemistry, and the top floor is biology and general science. And so I was on the top floor, and it was a really cold day because it's December in Colorado, where our school made us go to school even if there was 4 feet of snow and 4 of our buses got in a car accident. We still had to go.
That seems very specific. I feel like that must have actually happened.
It did.
Yeah. 4 is such a specific number to say unless it actually happened.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
definitely happened.
Wow, that's mad.
But he came in through that entrance, and this was before we had a security guard on that side of the building. We always had a security guard on the front of the building, but he had come in, and so Claire, the girl that unfortunately passed away from it, just started yelling at him like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? And I mean, unfortunately for her, but fortunately for the rest of the school, he was not a good shot. He didn't have a lot of practice. And so did she get hit in the forehead?
She got hit in the face.
Okay,
That's
yeah,
awful.
she got hit in the face, but that wasn't the one that ended up killing her. A ricochet went straight into her spine. And so, but she didn't pass away for at least a week.
A week.
Yeah, it was at least a week. But her friend was recounting her story, and they thought her friend had been shot because she caught her body. And so Claire's blood was all over her. But her friend luckily was unharmed. And that's when Carl ran into our library where the librarian was supposed to be.
And sorry, you mentioned that the janitor saw him. So had the janitor run off to find someone?
Yeah, the janitor found the librarian because he knew he was going after our librarian and got our librarian out of the building.
Oh, wow. Oh, well done to that guy.
Our janitors were pretty great there. But yeah, he got our librarian out of the building and called the cops. And earlier that day, it's also kind of weird because of earlier that day, Carl, also sorry, I'm a scatterbrain, so I'll be everywhere.
No, it's okay.
But Carl had kind of done what it's become a weird tradition in Colorado for high school shooters to go to a specific restaurant in Littleton and then go to a specific bowling alley right after that in Littleton and then go commit like the shooting. And that's because of when the Columbine shooters did what they did, that's what they did. So it's become a tradition for them to do the same thing. And although Columbine, I read a lot of serial killers and mass murder books because I find those people fascinating. I want to know what's going on in their brain. But they did that, and Columbine was one of the most horrible shootings because the cops didn't know what to do. But that helped them for the future shootings to know what to do. Because in Columbine, they stayed outside of the building while not knowing what to do while sorry, my cat just hit his head on the table. But they stayed outside of the building until they felt safe enough to go and get the kids. But now they just go straight into the building and try to get the guy. But Carl had he'd done that and then also put a pencil in one of our have a strange cat. But in one of our cafeteria doors to prop open the door, because those were doors that were constantly locked. And once he was done in the library, he let off a ton of rounds, didn't hit anybody. The only injury in the library was a kid broke his arm because a bookcase fell on him.
Oh, wow.
And which, I mean, it saved his life, but
Yeah.
But because if I had some swim team friends who were in the library who were able to tell us everything that happened in the library. And then he put off multiple Molotov cocktail bombs in our library. It lit on fire. And it was like a classic college library until that. And then it was just completely destroyed. Everything, it was destroyed. The sprinklers were going off. The fire alarm went off. And he started running around the building. He ran out of the building when he saw that the cops, the military, like all the different people were there. And he ran back in, let off another Molotov cocktail bomb in one of our little study areas in the trophy hall. And then he ran through what was my Spanish class, if I had been in the next period, and committed suicide in one of our auditoriums. And that was kind of his plan from the start, because they made us read it. They made us read his diary, which I was not happy about.
They made you read his diary?
Yeah, when the police report came out, it was kind of like a harder thing because of his family was dealing with all of that. Like his sister was in the building as well. And Claire's family, the girl who had passed away, was pushing so hard for them to release everything for years after that, and just like in a way torturing his family and blaming them for everything that had happened, even though they didn't know it was going to happen. But I remember when we were kind of hiding, it started off with, we heard, I believe it was 2 gunshots, and my teacher was like, oh, those damn chemists, because on Halloween we blow up pumpkins in chemistry.
Yeah, I was thinking like your first thought, I was wondering if your first thought would have been gunshot, or would have been something more innocent. Yes, that would make sense to me that you'd think it was something more innocent.
Yeah, we also blow up pumpkins on Halloween in chemistry, so we're like, oh, they're just doing something weird in chemistry. My teacher was like, oh, those damn chemists. And then there were 3 more gunshots, and everybody just went silent, because by then we were just like, that's not chemistry. And one of our biology teachers went out to look just to see, and we saw him run back to his classroom and just lock the door. So we went into lockdown, and that was what felt like a good while before our entire school went into lockdown. And we were just sitting there. I remember I was texting my mom because we had no idea what was going on. We were trying to figure out what was going on. And it was like, we were looking at the news, because we were like, we don't even know what's going on. We were trying to find some form of just like, oh, this isn't happening. But of course the news never helps that. And the first thing we read was like, oh, 2 people, there's 2 shooters, 17 already dead. That wasn't what happened. But it was
That's
like
terrifying.
Yeah, our news sucks here.
Yeah, it's not good.
Our news does not help with anything. But and so luckily that wasn't the case. But we were kind of sitting there for a while. I mean, I think my phone died before I even got on the bus.
I did.
Yeah, everybody was texting their parents, just trying to like basically say your last goodbyes. And it was like, then luckily the SWAT team was there, and they started moving the kids out in the room next to us. And now we didn't know that they were there. So we were like, oh God, we're going to die. Like the shooters in the next room were going to die. And we didn't know.
Oh my God, you thought it was him in the next room?
Because we just heard a ton of moving. And so we were like, we're going to die. And luckily it was a SWAT team, but they were banging on our door, and my teacher didn't open the door. And so they banged on it again. She just like peeked out of the blinds and saw it was a SWAT team, then opened up the door, and she did what I guess a lot of teachers didn't do, but she was like, just get what you need. Like don't forget your phone. if you have a jacket, grab your jacket, because I mean it was like
Yeah,
it was like 15 degrees and snowing outside, and it was like, and then we had to be completely searched leaving the building, and they had, can't remember what kind of, it was a high powered gun, basically pointed at your temple with their finger on the trigger ready to shoot if they found any weapon on you, because they didn't know if there was another shooter. And then it was just like a horde of students going down this tiny back staircase just to go outside. And as soon as you got to the door, they searched you again. And as soon as they didn't find anything, they told you, because they didn't know that he had committed suicide yet. They just couldn't find him. And so they were like, just run to the track field, run to the football field.
Oh my God.
And yeah, it was, and that was the time where we were sitting on the track field for a good hour or an hour and a half. And then we were told we were going to the school, which I told my mom. And then all of a sudden we're at church and we're just like, oh.
That's where your phone died.
No, it didn't die at the church.
No, it died before, because that's where I went to the school.
We were told we were going to the school, but we ended up at the church, and luckily I found a fellow swim team member that I had known for a while and had her tell her mom, because her phone also died, but her mom knew that she was there, that I was at the church instead, and that's where my mom found me. But yeah, it was just kind of weird going back into the school afterwards, because we weren't allowed to go back to they searched everything, backpacks, lockers. I think they found a ton of Molotov cocktail bombs in his locker, which was also a tradition from Columbine as well. But fortunately for Columbine, none of their bombs went off because they weren't made correctly. And Molotov cocktail bombs, luckily, aren't incredibly dangerous because they just really start fires. But I remember, after that, it's like everybody was just kind of, we didn't have finals. Everything was weird. It's like everybody was kind of just always on edge. And going back to get our stuff was weird because everything was exactly how it was. It's like you could see our library was completely destroyed. And like they had us go down the back staircase because Claire's body was in the trophy hall where we would have gone out of. So they were like, let's not have people see that right now. So, but I believe, from what I've been told, they let his sister go back in after they had found his dead body to say her final goodbyes to her because she wanted to. And she never ended up coming back to the school. So,
yeah, I can kind of see why.
Yeah.
And when you say it was a week before finals, was that your last year in that school, or did you go back then the following year?
No, that was my first year at that school, and I stayed there all 4 years. So.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird, as my mom said in the last podcast, I can't live in Colorado again. There's a lot of other reasons, but that's another reason. It's just like how common they are in Colorado. And I have another feeling that it's part of because of Columbine was in Colorado, and that's the most notorious school shooting other than Sandy Hook. But and actually it's just in the States, it's a huge thing.
Yeah, even here, because you've mentioned a couple there by their monikers or whatever, but there's only two that I recognize as those two, Columbine and Sandy Hook. From a European perspective, we've heard of those ones.
Those were the most two notorious ones, so I think they were the worst ones.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, but afterwards it was like I definitely have developed more of a dark humor because of it, because that's how I started coping with it.
Yeah, I feel you on that one.
But yeah, I'm like, it never really felt real for the longest time until actually my freshman year in college. And I went back home for a winter break and had my first flashback. And you never think you're going to have those, because it's like those were strictly military people had them because all the trauma they went on, and like you never think you're gonna have them. And then I had it, and it was suddenly just like, oh yeah, I went through that. That was something I went through. But I also remember in middle school, specifically in Colorado and the Denver area, they have you listen to Columbine, like all the police radios on Columbine, to kind of teach you about it. But they're always telling you it'll never happen to you. Like this won't happen to you.
Wow.
And I think they've changed that now that there have been 5 in one area.
Yeah, that is well, it sounds really scary for kids to have to listen to, but yeah, also maybe that has contributed to the copycats. So yeah, maybe changing that is a good idea.
Yeah, it's like the copycats have become more of a traditional thing for them, it feels like, because it's every single time. But they do it all differently. They just always do that same beginning of going to the restaurant and then the bowling alley. And no matter how many times that bowling alley has changed ownership, it's still the same bowling alley. But
wow.
After that, I definitely developed a dark humor. But it was kind of like my mom and I were already super close. We grew up in a Mexican family. Our families have always been really close, but we got even closer after that. And even when I got to college, we got even closer because I was all the way across the country. So
yeah. And it, like when you see it happen again in America, like how do you feel?
It's kind of more anger at this point, that because of I know how mainly admin treats the situation, they kind of they kind of try to ignore it for as long as possible until it gets too far, and that happens. And then they're just literally letting the teacher not even making the teachers fend for their lives and their students' lives. It's like with Sandy Hook specifically, it's like so many teachers shoved kids in like closets, like, and that was in elementary school, and they were like shoving kids in closets and lockers, just trying to keep them safe, giving up their own lives just to keep their students safe, and admins just sitting there not really caring about it. So it's kind of more frustrating from that standpoint, because of it's like it keeps happening. They're, especially at mainly high schools, they don't really care about the students' mental health anymore. They're just like, well, what do you want to do? They don't want to like help us with any of that. Even in middle schools, it's like a few years after my high school shooting, there was a huge thing in Colorado about live stream suicides.
Kids I think I might remember this.
Yeah, kids were live streaming their suicides on Facebook and all these different things, and admin wasn't caring. It's like they were just kind of letting it happen.
And so, sorry, just to make sure I'm on the same, what do you mean by admin? Do you mean like the kind of people who work at the school, or?
It's like administration, so like the principals and higher.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. My mom's a teacher, so we've always just said admin.
Yeah, no, so yeah, I wasn't 100% sure whether you meant like, yeah, but I would have thought of admin as like secretaries and stuff. So yeah, I was just a bit confused for a sec, but that makes sense. Like, so the kind of principals and vice principals and stuff, and the people who put in place the policies aren't doing enough to kind of try and change it going forward.
Yeah, it's like specifically in Colorado, because I never went to school in another state other than college in Alabama, but they don't really care about the students' mental health until it's gone too far, and then they do the bare minimum.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, in my school, Claire, we had a population of about 1,200 students from ECE, so preschool through 8th grade. We had one part-time psychologist and one counselor. That's it. And so there was not enough people to take care of whatever needs. So they never targeted like the mental health of our students. And we had students come from refugee camps from all over the world. So that's just an example of how it was done in Colorado.
Wow.
Those students were great though. They were funny.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Love those students. But yeah, so it's mental health, especially. I get it's so weird because when you think about not really paying attention to mental health as much, you look more to the countries that kind of they'll hide it. They don't talk about it. But in the US, it's such a huge thing of ignoring it. It's like people will talk about it in the US, but it's so easily ignored or just pushed off as oh, well, why don't you just get over it type of thing. And so it's kind of strange to look at it because it's like people don't care and don't want to care. And that was from going through all this stuff, like especially when I got to college, I developed a really big issue with alcohol, and I was drinking a lot, just trying to and I was a little vindictive during my senior show and working, but I prefaced most of my art based off of how I had to deal with all that, how it pushed me into drinking a lot more than I should have, and then how I was able to get out of it, and kind of showing people more of we need to pay attention to this kind of stuff, because if it's going to keep happening, if we don't actually pay attention to what kids are going through. It's like if the administration had just gotten Carl some help with his anger issues, since it was well documented, or sorry, my cat's being weird, or if we actually care to pay attention and help people who are truly going through a lot of mental health issues, we might be able to stop more of these instead of just ignoring them until they happen type of thing.
And so you mentioned that you in college you were kind of drinking and stuff, and how did you kind of come out through that? Because you seem like you can talk about it now, you're able, so how did you deal with it, I guess?
I dealt mainly with my emotions through my art. I've always loved art, and then when I got actually just a few months ago, I got my bachelor's in fine arts.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it was really just being pushed to have a meaning behind our art. And I was like, well, I don't really want to talk about this because I've talked about it so many times where I can talk about it normally now, but I didn't want to talk about it to a whole group of people and make them feel bad for me and then give me a good grade because of they're just oh, you went through that. But I kind of pushed it more to how I coped with it and then how I had to get out of the coping, because it wasn't a healthy coping when I got to college. But it was more of dealing with it through art and then having to tell the story so many times because people oh, where'd you go to high school? What happened in high school? Why do you have a dark humor? Why do you do certain things? And I mean, I've been paranoid since I was little because my mom lived through the Night Stalker in California. So, but it's more of I also had friends asking me, how do you know that was a gunshot? And it's I just know.
Yeah. Sorry, the Night Stalker was a serial killer, was it?
Richard Ramirez.
He was a serial killer when I was in college in Los Angeles, and he was running rampant all over the Los Angeles basin. So we couldn't go to sleep. We couldn't go to sleep. We had to have all interior, exterior lights on. And that was a hot summer. So people usually, they didn't have a lot of air conditioning back then. So we slept with our windows open so to let the fresh air in, but we couldn't. So a lot of us, I slept with a baseball bat by my bed.
There was a huge burst in people buying guns.
Right.
Because of the Richard Ramirez you never knew if he was going to kill you or not, if he was going to rape you or not, if he was going to come in. He always went in through an open window or an open door. Uh-huh. He didn't have a specific reason of killing other than he wanted to. And he wouldn't always kill you. He was a known Satanist. Would there was this one account where a woman was saying he had raped her and said, I won't kill you if you don't tell anyone. She's like, I'm not going to tell anyone, I swear to God. And he's like, swear to Satan. And so,
Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of copycats after him too. But
so Heidi, you lived through that, and then so you knew about that obviously growing up then, Marissa.
Oh yeah, it was a huge thing, and we always like before we went to sleep. Wait, no, we still leave that back light on all night.
We still leave the back light on. We still bar our windows. We make sure our windows are closed.
Every door is locked. And I brought that with me to college. And when I lived with 3 guys, they would never lock our balcony door. I mean, we lived on the 4th floor, but
still yeah, I totally get where you're coming from.
I only got them to start locking the back door when they watched the Ted Bundy series, and he would scale buildings to get into college girls' rooms and rape and kill them. You know, we have a notorious thing of serial killers here too.
Yeah, we do.
Wow. The US is great.
So the reason I asked you just about the like seeing it happen again was because actually the day, I think, or the day before, or the week of, definitely, that I posted your episode, Heidi, there was another one. I think it was in California, was it?
Yeah, there was.
Because I remember asking Heidi, I was like, should I hold it back or should I not upload it? And we went ahead and uploaded it.
Right. Every time something happens, she's more sensitive, particularly to the school shootings, which, you know, but for me as a mom, it's like all the mass shootings are the triggers for me. So anytime something happens, I said, don't look at the news. Don't look at the news.
I look at the news.
She looked anyway.
She was telling me the last time, she's like, I text her and say, don't look at the news. And I was like, yeah, I bet she doesn't listen to that.
I look at the news.
But because I'm from California. So anything that happens in California, I'm extremely sensitive to, because that's where all my family is. So it's, you get triggered because it's a mass shooting, and then you get triggered because your family's there. So it's it's rough. It's rough.
Yeah, I'm more sensitive about the school shootings just because, like, ever since a young age, we're taught like this is where you can feel safe. And in the US, it's becoming increasingly less safe of a place to even go. But with more of the, I guess, just regular street violence or mass shootings outside, it's like, oh, that's street violence or that's an asshole. But with school shootings, it's just like, what the fuck's going on anymore? It's like, this is supposed to be the safe place. But yeah, it's especially after, obviously, the pandemic, all the people finally getting out again. It's like we had the huge Black Lives Matter protests last summer because of George Floyd and the increasing amount of mainly Black Americans being killed because of our police violence here, which still not too happy about that. But and then recently people have been coming to more of attention of Hispanic people, or just people from whose heritage comes from south of the border. There've been kind of, even though it's been going on for a while, they've been finally really noticing that same stuff happens to us. It happens to Asian Americans, Muslim Americans. It's like all these different people, and when the pandemic happened, people were pretty racist against anyone of East Asian descent, of like China, Korea, Japan, because they looked Chinese, even though they're vastly different cultures. But it was mainly just stuck with racism on like a New York subway, and then this summer it was like, it started up with that, the shootings in Georgia. This guy was going to different massage parlors in Georgia. I think he went to 2, and he was on his way down to Florida to do more, but he shot up 2 different massage parlors that were Asian American owned massage parlors. And then it just started up a whole new thing again of just violence against Asian Americans. And
Sorry, I'm just laughing at your cat.
He's not even 1 year old yet, so he's a little rambunctious. But it started up just a huge thing in America, all over again, because we had the Yellow Peril, which was, when was that?
I don't know.
I can't remember when it was, but that was a huge violence against Asian Americans, basically. And one of my other favorite YouTubers, because yes, I watch a lot of your videos, but he's Asian American, and when the massage parlor shootings happened and all this stuff, there was an attack in
sorry.
There was an attack in San Francisco, which is where I'm moving in the fall for grad school, against an Asian American old lady who beat the shit out of the guy who was attacking her.
Good for her.
Yeah, it's like, not only is that lady power, but that's ethnicity power. But and so he made a huge video about that, and it's like they just continue. And we had the Yellow Peril, which was a huge thing in history, of which a lot in America specifically, they don't teach you about these things. You have to learn about them on your own.
Really?
And so they barely teach you anything about slavery, anything about the civil rights movement. It's like they only really want to teach you about, oh, this was the Civil War and this was the Revolutionary War. Oh, and yeah, we're just going to fast track to World War II. And they don't even teach you much about Vietnam either. But we had the Yellow Peril, which was a huge thing against Asian Americans or just Asian people who were migrating here. And then we also had, like, it's just all these different things. They don't teach you much about the aftermath of 9/11 and how many Muslim Americans were killed and, like, tortured just because of the way they looked or the religion they did. And it's actually a huge thing in America, which makes school shootings just kind of part of it. It's like just this mass violence in America of people constantly being angry just because of you're different from them, or because they've been ignored for so long that they've just been pushed to their limits. But we definitely have a big shooting issue here.
Yeah. And would you have, maybe you don't, but like, would you have any advice for anyone else who's been through something similar?
I guess it's just like, mainly for me, it's just find a healthy coping mechanism, because of mine in the end wasn't very healthy. And but also it's like it's more of a, I guess, everyday thing, especially in America. You don't know when a shooting's gonna happen, so just like always forgive people. It's like no matter what they've done, even if like you don't want to talk to them again, even if you don't talk to them again, or like you never see them again, just at least forgive them and know that you had forgiven them. You don't have to tell them you did if you don't want to talk to them, but just like at least forgive them for what they did, so you get that closure as well.
Yeah, wow. I didn't think of that actually. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that. I know it's probably hard to talk about.
I mean, it's been 8 years, so it's been increasingly better to be able to talk about.
Yeah, so I know you can't remember your Instagram username. I was going to ask you again to tell people where to find you on the internet, but I will put your links in the description and people can go and follow you. I'll put yours in the description as well, Heidi, in case anyone wants to message you as well. Because from the last episode, you'd said that people could message you as well if they wanted to talk about things like this. And thank you so much for sharing that story.
Yeah, and it is definitely a Marissa Lena 64. I had to pull it up.
Just checked. Okay, perfect. But yeah, it's really good to have the first person perspective as well, because I know we got Heidi's perspective as a mother who was like waiting for news on where you were.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching and listening. The Storytime podcast is available on the usual audio platforms. If you could give us a review, that would really help us out. And it's also available in video version on YouTube. So thank you so much for joining in. And thank you guys for coming on. Thanks, Heidi, for coming on again. And thanks, Marissa, for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast was brought to you by The Shift. For more like this, check out theshift.ie.